Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do the essence of NESARA again. This is the fourth of this series. Now, I want to just give a little kind of point on the essence of NESARA point issues in here. We're going to deal with separate points, but they could be used in any particular order here, other than this one here. This one closely follows the last one where we're talking about the death of banking. But we're going to get through contracts, and the two contracts I really want you to talk about are, asset-backed contracts. Now, there are kind of a couple different types of loans that you can get. You can get unsecured loans or secured loans, okay, which is asset-backed, okay. So, for instance, an unsecured loan is like I'm gonna get a loan for an iPhone, or I might get a loan for for medical devices or whatever that might be. Those are called unsecured because they're not going to go in and take claw that money or claw the particular item from you, like take it out of your knee kind of stuff, right? Whereas a secured loan, actually they go through several more steps in here. But you're going to also see the nature of how bad they take this. Now, here, listen, I am not beating up the title agents, and I'm not necessarily beating up your local banker, because most of these people, they have no idea. They've been, in essence, born into the system and have never really thought it through from a constitutional law point. And listen, I thought I defended it for a long time. I thought it was just fine until I realized some of the natures of that issue. Okay, uh, you know, I've been praying about you guys a lot, and I know we're all stressed in different ways. Today's the 25th of September in 2024. Uh, Trust me, this is coming to a close. Do I know when? No, I can't worry about that because it's so far out of my control. Okay, so let's get into this a little bit. We're going to bring up my websites here first off, and then we'll hit some videos that are kind of interesting. Um, Now, I'm going to pull me off the screen here. I want you to see a little closer some of this information here. So, contract law is a body of law, and by the way, this is international. This is in every state. Contract law looks at agreements between for an exchange of something between two parties. Now, it is legally binding, and many times, if you have a type of contract, even if the contract's not a mistake, it could be a serious problem. You really need to be really careful of this kind of stuff. So, what it sets itself into is in civil law. So, you're not necessarily going to jail, depending upon how much you did against someone with that too. That there are points of jurisdiction that comes in and arbitration that happens because of contract law, but basically this. Um, when you breach a contract, you've got a potential for pretty serious damages. Okay, and so when we look at this kind of stuff, I want you to think about some of the essence of those particular contracts. An offer, which is to do something, right? And then the acceptance, which is a signing point, a consideration, which means giving money, or you might trade one thing for another. I might trade a car for a particular service. Like a used car for a particular service kind of thing. That, they're doing my driveway kind of thing, but I'm going to trade the guy a really expensive car kind of thing, whatever that might be. You have to also be competent. That means legally competent. We don't have a person who's mentally infirmed or doesn't have power of attorney in their own life. And it needs to be mutually beneficial for both sides, right? And so that's when we look at this kind of stuff. Now, by the way, almost anyone, let me pull this off the screen for a second. Almost anyone can do a contract. You really can. There are a bunch of little tiny contract points that are on the internet. You can find a contract capability to buy and sell a car or any kind of thing out there, right? And I always recommend, when you're talking about contracts, because by the way, they're going to exist after NESARA starts, because they're part of common law, they're part of the Constitution. They're very straightforward to look at. Now, there's complicated natures that happen for it, but there's a simple path of doing this, right? There's some complex things, but that means simple doesn't necessarily not mean complex, okay? It doesn't mean easy. It just means that there are steps to this, right? Now, you should always look at agreements and be careful with them. I've entered into so many agreements, and I read them like there's no tomorrow in that way. And that's just something that I have found is very helpful, but it also shows the person how serious I am with that too. Now, we're going to talk about what letter agreement is, and it talks about this. It's a written legal document between two parties who want a simple way of making the discussion transactional. So it's a little bit more detailed on a letter agreement, but basically, that talks about the format, the topic, body, greeting, all these other kinds of issues that happen. And there's always signatures, and that's contract law just the same way with that too. Now, I'm going to show you a very interesting video. I'm going to pull this off the screen here, and I'm going to show you an incredibly interesting video. Now, I've cut many of these videos, so don't realize that they're not fully complete. But these are all from YouTube. I will include those particular YouTube videos in the descriptions. You can watch the whole thing if you want to, but I wasn't trying to take away from it. I was just kind of limit the conversation on specifics that happen here. This is one of the interesting ones. This company is called Valuetainment, and they just they're so awakened in so many ways. I'm fascinated by them with this too. But this is the question: where does the money come from?
Book to my account. Where does the bank get the money from? Is it from deposits, customer deposits, as the financial intermediation theory claims, or is it from excess reserves?
Remember, what he's talking about is where do they get the money from to do your car loan of, let's just say it's a very expensive car, a $70,000, $100,000 car, a $400,000 house, right? It's that kind of thing. So these are secured loans with that too.
Reserves at the central bank, as the fractional reserve theory says, because without excess reserves, you can't do the new lending. Or is it just created out of nothing, out of thin air, invented? And well, the conclusion was the money was invented. The deposits didn't change. The reserves, they didn't even check how much do we have in reserves, and was untouched. And it was simply newly credited to me. Now, if you look at the legal side, for those who are interested in this question, from the legal perspective, it's actually it's most clear. It's clearly visible what's going on, because what the bank really does is when you get a loan, a mortgage, whatever, the moment you sign the loan contract, that can be considered, and the bank does consider it as a promissory note that you've written. In other words, it's security. It's an IOU that you've issued as the borrower.
Of course.
And you promise, it's a promise to pay you to repay this money. So really, you've issued a security, like when the government issues treasuries. You've issued your loan, your mortgage treasury, your security. Okay. The bank now says, okay, we're going to buy that. And it puts it on its balance sheet as an asset, because now they have a claim on you because you promised to repay this money. And you said...
Okay, let me pause that for a second. Loans with companies, specifically banks. But by the way, there are lots of other companies that will work this kind of process as well. I see that with companies who have very significant costs of goods. They will work with their customers, who are the ones out there. They're out-facing customers, the consumers, seeing the consumers, and they're selling it directly to the consumer. So they're not getting just the cost of goods, but they're having to do the profit margins. And what happens is companies will actually get into agreements with those particular manufacturers. And so, and here's the point. If you get into an agreement, they might have a unit total, like, if it's a larger firm, they might say you're going to do 100 units or 15,000 units a month or whatever that might be. And they will book that as profits on their balance sheet. Now I know you go, wait a second, profits. No, booking that, doesn't that happen on your profit and loss? No, first off, it goes into the balance sheet, and then it comes over when the actual totals that happen from the month. Even if someone books, 100 units of something, if the company that is buying those units from that manufacturer, if they only do 80 units, that's what you're putting in the profit and loss for that month. But they're behind 20 units, right? So this is a way of creating extra value in the company with this stuff too. And guess what? Banks are doing that. Now it's relatively scary because, wait a second, banks are giving someone money for this. And he'll explain where that comes from a little bit.
Hey, at this point, oh, actually, I don't care about these details, just give me the money. And if the banker is careful, the banker will say, you will find it in your account with us. They may carelessly say, oh, we've transferred it to your account. That would be technically wrong because no transfer takes place. That's what I confirmed in that empirical experiment, that when I got the money, it was not transferred from any other account. I mean, you can see where does it come from, and it didn't come from any other account inside the bank or outside the bank.
So listen to that statement for a second, a little closer. The money didn't come from inside the bank or outside the bank. Like if you go to your dad and you're getting a loan from your dad for $10,000 to accomplish something, he's taken his money from his bank and transferring that to you so that you can go to school or whatever that might be, right? And yet, in the banking world, if they're writing out for a $400,000 house, they're writing a check to that, but it's so strange in this way. It's so circumspect that it's almost hard to find exactly where that stuff comes from. So they have this thing called titles. Now, and by the way, NESARA talks all about nobility and titles. Okay, nobility is like someone who is a king or a duke or whatever that might be, so that they have the ability to they're just on top of the heap in essence, right? And yet they have been lording that stuff over us. Lording comes from that, the Middle English kind of concept, not lord, but lording comes from a Middle English kind of word. And what that is saying, I have control over you people. You're all idiots. You're all serfs underneath me in essence. And that's where the banking world kind of gets this with that too. Let's go into titles a little closer, because that titles don't necessarily exist in the realm of the unsecured asset. So that medical device that you're getting, let's say you're paying $5,000 for a really expensive medical device, and again, they're taking that money out and they are giving that kind of thing, and it's on your debt issues. So you're paying a loan for that. Now, and how they're doing that is still up in the air with that kind of stuff too. And it does depend, but normally they're using money if it's a smaller amount. But those large amounts, they don't have the money for. They just don't have $400,000 to go write a check to that. They are getting it through sometimes in the fractional reserve system, and sometimes an infusion of cash that just comes from an outside source. That's why we have these mortgage companies in the middle of it. I'm going to show you some of that stuff too. Let me show you a mortgage guy and what he actually says about your credit. It's very interesting what he says here.
Here are some things I don't care about on your bank statements. I don't care how much you spend at Starbucks or DoorDash or OF or utilities or insurances or cell phone bills. What we do care about, what you spend on, or if you're paying the IRS for any taxes owed, if you have child support or alimony that you're paying, if you have any unusual large deposits that we need to source and season, then we'd care about those. And that's about it.
Now think about that for a second. What he just basically said is that they don't care about the normal expenses on an everyday basis. Now that isn't my experience. I mean, because I've seen them question those as well. But let's just take it on face value from what he's saying there. But secondarily, do you pay your IRS bill? And see, where is that coming from? Why would they care if you're paying your IRS bill? Should that have anything to do with your ability to do the house? Right? It's because the banking system is hooked up into IRS. And by the way, IRS thing is, we're going to talk about that one here in a little bit. Okay. But they're talking about they're talking about where you're spending your money. So they are sourcing some of those areas to find them out. It's real interesting with that too. So let's listen to this little video. It's kind of a cut up video. There's some silliness in there. Just ignore some of that stuff, but it is kind of cute to give you some background.
But
on
what
titles.
are all these costs? I'm just a stick figure. I don't do high finance. So I asked my brother, the one that always had to be the banker when we played board games. I said, bro, what the heck is title insurance? Do I need to pay it? He said, well, hey, I'm just a stick figure too, but remember that board game? Okay, look, say you'd saved all your money for one big move. You're going to buy this property. You give her the cash, and she gives you the title. Remember those little cards? Yeah. But 2 moves later, after she's busted out of the game, another player says she gave him title to that place in a secret agreement. So he claims the title is his. Oh man, did you just lose your house and your cash? My bro said, see, this could happen with real property too, like that house you're buying. Title, legal ownership, isn't always crystal clear. Missing records, tax liens, even divorces can result in legit claims to the title on your house after you buy it. Ouch. But good news, you can insure your legal ownership, your title, just like you'd insure the building, only lots cheaper. Your title company, these guys, help you arrange title insurance. You just pay a one-time fee as you buy the house. It's like getting a safe deposit box for this. The bank gets a key, that's lender's title insurance, and you get a key, that's owner's title insurance. Their key stops working.
Wait a second. And this is a really good point here with that too. You have a key to your title, but the bank also has a key to your title too. And see, and most people don't realize that. I mean, they know that, on titles for cars and for homes, the bank, BOA, pick the bank that might be on your particular title. And it could be some crazy name, because mortgage lenders are thru-ports as well. So there's the craziness as well. We don't even, many times you have no idea who really owns your house. You're paying some mortgage servicer, right? Like I pay one right now, a mortgage servicer I never even heard of with that too. And so you look at this kind of stuff and you're going, how is this actually working? No, they can say there's these claimants out here, the IRS, remember he brings up the IRS, it always keeps coming up here with that too. So, and an ex-wife or whatever that might be, of the old seller now has this thing. Now see, it's really simple to fix this, because with a good contract search, now there's called new things with smart contracts that can come out with AI, and you can actually find through the records within a very short time frame exactly who that is. These things tend to take weeks and weeks to get through, and it's a pretty expensive process with that too. But they always want to sell the title, and that's what they believe their primary goal is. So let's finish this up here a little bit.
When the mortgage is paid off, your key, your insured ownership, works basically forever. Hey, it costs about what a real safe deposit box would cost in the course of your mortgage. And if a claim does come up, the title insurance company has to deal with the costs and hassles. Not you. You just keep on owning the house. Remember, you can't sell without a clear title. Protecting it, just sensible. And then my bro said, it's all on the HUD-1 form at closing, but, hey, I'm a stick figure. Draw me a picture, right? I mean, he's my bro, but he can be kind of dorky sometimes.
Okay, so let's get into and show you a little bit about title companies with that too. So let's bring back up some stuff on the stage here. So here's on the title companies. What does the title company do? And people ask this all the time. Well, first off, they have title insurance. You just learned a little bit about the title insurance. And then here's what they're doing inside of the title insurance. They're looking for forgery, fraud, tax liens, excuse me, incorrectly executed documents. Like, what? They make these documents so difficult. It's just amazing. For instance, in 22, they said title insurance companies paid more than $596 million in claims, according to American Land Title Association, ALTA. And it's just like, wait a second, why is that happening? If you're selling a property, you're not supposed to be able to sell the property unless it's yours, which actually right there violates contract law. So the person needs to be legally liable who sold that property with that too. And you should be able to go to court and say, listen, I bought that contract. You're utilizing a contract should be between two parties, and you should hold that person accountable to that thing. Okay. Now, then there's a difference between homeowner insurance, but here's what they slide in here. Okay. And again, I'm not trying to beat up the title companies. There are in a fiat system, there are the necessary evil with it too. But here's the point. The title company is chosen by normally the seller of the house. So they get to have the rights over the title company. So who are they really working for? The seller. Okay. And so, it talks about, look at your lending, the person that you're going through, check your financial status, your abilities, and here's the big point that they actually do in this. These contracts, and I want you to kind of just realize these are real estate contracts, buy-sell agreement, listing agent, leasing agreements. And then here's what I want you to see. Is the real estate contract valid? There must be an acceptance of the contract, an agreement, parties' ability to do this. And then it gets into the legal description, the name, the purchase, and the ownership. So we're talking about contract law. Okay. So I spent a lot of time on here and some of you already know this and some of you don't. But let me explain something in here that title companies, and frankly, mortgage lenders who are just thru-ports, that they don't have the money either. And they're making a bit of a money in there too. So for instance, $200,000-$300,000 house, the mortgage company is making, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 kind of thing. This is absolutely crazy when you realize that. You realize they're taking a big piece of that puzzle for just doing the lending, just doing the processing of the paperwork, and the title company just to do a secondary processing of the paperwork is taking another piece of this, and the bank has nothing to do with this. So if there's a problem, guess what? It's the title company's problem. And what they do, this is the stealing that they've done over and over again. So if Scott buys a house and I put on a $400,000 house, if I want to get out of PMI, principal and interest, mortgage interest, let's say I'm going to put $80,000 down, which is 20%. And by the way, they've made it really cheap, PMI, with this too. In the past, it used to be more expensive. But the reality is that person has $80,000, at least has the capability of probably making the payments for that particular house. But when they don't have PMI, they don't have the 20%, that person walks in with $2,000, some crazy number for a $400,000 house. And when they don't make it punitive on the payments and going, your payments are this much more than if you just had the 20% down, then what happens is that people buy into that house and then they're out of it. And here's the thing, they could pay into that house. If it's a 30-year mortgage, they could pay into it for a year. So let's just say you had, make up a number, $2,000 $2,500 a month, and you did it over 12 months. I mean, that's a massive amount of money you just paid for that house with that too. So what is that? $60,000 kind of thing, or $55,000 you paid into that house over that 1 year period of time. If you defaulted on the house in the second year, and for whatever reason you couldn't pay for it, they'll take that house, they will put it back on the market and sell it for $420,000, and you get nothing for it. Actually, they penalize you left and right, but you paid $55,000 of monies toward them. So they actually made $55,000, and they get to resell the house for possibly more than before. You're going, wait a second. How is this? None of this stuff has any fairness with it too. It's because what the banks have done is isolated themselves, and they didn't sign the agreement. And because they didn't sign the agreement, they get to do almost anything out there. This is the thievery that where it comes from is the central bank. Okay, do not go blaming your little local bank, because they have to even have a bank. They have to have a bank charter. Now, I mean, as a business owner, I don't have to have a charter. Now, I do have to have a LLC or S corporation or C corporation, whatever, with it too. I file with the state, but the charters are really, really restrictive, and those charters are directly through the FDIC. And so you're talking about, they're all focused because they have to. They don't have any choice in the matter. They have to go directly out to the 13 Fed bankers with it too. So who's the problem? You got to go up the food chain up to the top of this. And so you have to rip apart these things. And so when someone says to you, I don't really believe in this NESARA piece, I don't get it, I don't see how you can kill off the debts here, I'm saying right there's the illegality of the lending system. They have stolen from you. They've not just done compound interest, which is ungodly. When you look at compound interest, you normally pay about 2.5 times the rate that you have. Now, when we're talking about rates, and I'm gonna give you one example. I used to think that mortgage rates were a direct tie to when the Fed would lower or raise that interest rate. So when they would raise the interest rates from 5% to 5.5%, make up a number that you're comfortable with. There's always a certain amount upon rates that is the profit margin for that bank. So if it's 5%, they might have 2.5% on top of that. So then they're normally charging 7.5% on those loans. But guess what? It's not a 1-to-1 ratio in that way. What that does is it's trying to curb inflation. And it's because inflation is running out of control, and that's exactly what we're in right now, right? But what happens is that the Treasury bonds are the more direct relation to why the rates for houses and cars and everything else is so high. Is because no one wants the cash, and because those rates are so bad, they're the inverse relationship and making it horrible over here for buying a house. And so when people are sitting there saying, and I hear this all the time from these mortgage people, the title people, the banking people, it's going to be great once they lower the rates. They did. And is it great? Think about the rate. If I lowered rates, and see, right now I have like a 3.25 or something like that. I did this right in the height of the pandemic. Okay. And it saved me a ton of money. I actually learned a lot about some banking systems that I've talked on other videos. It's not really the most relevant here. And yet, if you're sitting there with a 3.5% rate on your house right now, and you're talking about the potential for buying a new house, and that new house could be 7 or 8%, are you going to buy a new house? So what if the interest rates from the Fed were a direct link to interest rates for buying a car or buying a house? What if they were, which they're not, but what if they were? So what if it means, they were 7 and 8% interest and now they're 7.5 to 6.5? That's so high compared to what you have, because you're going to look at that number. People are not buying houses. The rate of not purchasing, because they're going, I'll just stay in the house I have right now because I can't afford doing that kind of thing. And then there's a huge push to get people into these ARMs with adjustable rate mortgages with this too. And so this adjustable rate, the first couple years are okay. And then boom, your payment goes up here. And then boom, your payment's like through the roof. And the person's going, I default. I can't afford that big number. And they were not prepared for this. This is the same thing we had problems with back in 2008. And by the way, that occurred 3 to 5 years before the 2007, 2009, Great Recession and stuff. That was back in that time frame, right? And I remember it. I remember getting pushed in 2003 about getting an ARM, adjustable rate ARM, and I was like, that doesn't make sense to me, and I didn't even know why it didn't make sense to me. I know my wife and I are looking at each other going, no, we're not doing this. We're going to get a fixed rate because I can bank upon that. I can trust upon that particular number that we're having. And yet today, they're doing the exact same thing that they swore that they wouldn't do in the 2008 crisis. That the Fed and the Treasury and, you had Bush and then Obama, who said, put all these strictures on the mortgage industry. And by the way, the mortgage industry almost got totaled in that time frame. It's been totaled for a very long time frame. Because the banks want to do all the loans, but then they still have all these little ways that they're getting all the monies and they're still not signing the contract. It's a violation of contract law. Simply put, because of that issue, what we're going to see is a debt forgiveness, not just because of a fairness issue, but because of a violation of contract law. And so that systemic nature of violation of contract law will mess the crap out of these people with that too. And it's going to be fascinating with that too. And so how is that going to come? It's going to happen for every single loan. Okay. Every single loan is done this way. If you go to a car dealership, I tried to show you some car dealership ones, and they're so convoluted. It was really difficult, but you've all been to a car dealership, right? You negotiate a price on a car, let's just say, you have a $30,000 car and you think the payment's going to be, $400 a month or whatever that might be, $350 a month, whatever you kind of thought the negotiation was. And you get, even if you're pre-approved, and they go, well, we can beat that rate. And we go, okay, well, if you can beat the rate, great. And you go with that new XYZ bank. You're going to the loan officer. Wait a second. The loan officer is not the XYZ bank. He actually signs that loan for every single bank that they ever utilize. How can he, who doesn't participate in the money transfer, how can he sign for a bank? That's called contract law fraud. That is systemic fraud that they've created upon us for generations with that stuff too. And that stuff is the part of NESARA that most people just, they're not seeing it because they've so used to the institutions out there. So guys, I hope that helps you out. We're going to get into the IRS issues. We're going to get into a lot of these other things to help you get a clear picture of what we're talking about. Thanks so much.